I spent over 150 grand on business mentors, coaches, and masterminds. And almost all of it was solving the wrong problem. Not because the coaches were bad, because most of them were genuinely good at what they do, but they were treating the symptom, my business, when the actual problem was the brain that was running the business. And it took me years and a very expensive education to finally figure that out. Now in this video, I'm going to walk you through the 4 most expensive lessons that my ADHD brain taught me. From the goal setting exercise that made me realize that my brain was wired differently, to the habit that was silently bleeding me dry every day for years. And if you've ever spent money on a coach, a course, or a system, and you still felt like things weren't clicking, then this one's for you. The first big investment that I made was about 25 grand over an 18-month period. I was young, I was hungry, and I really wanted to grow my business. So I found someone who was where I wanted to be and I paid to learn from them. And I want to be really clear, this wasn't time wasted. This was genuinely transformational in a number of different ways. I learned things that shaped how I still think about business today. But there was one thing that they asked me to do that I just could not connect with. They wanted me to set these big, grandiose annual goals. You know, the monetary goals. Where do you want to be in 12 months? What's the revenue number that you're going to hit? And I sat there, but nothing came. Not because I didn't want to grow, I did. But truth be told, the money just didn't excite me. It wasn't lighting up my brain. To me, it just felt like a number on a spreadsheet. And every time they brought it up, and they did quite frequently, I felt uncomfortable. Because I was basically just writing down a number that I thought they wanted to hear, almost like a tick box exercise. I didn't care about the money. I cared about how I felt. I wanted my weeks to feel a certain way. I wanted the freedom and the stimulation and to do the work every day that mattered to me. And the money was just a logical thing that would help me to facilitate all of that. But alone, it was never the thing that was going to get me out of bed in the morning. And that confused me at the time because I was surrounded by a lot of high-level entrepreneurs that were really excited by the numbers. They'd get excited about hitting their first 50K month or whatever it was. And I'd just sit there thinking, I don't give a shit about any of this. But nobody told me why. Nobody said to me that your brain doesn't respond to abstract future rewards like everybody else does. I just thought I was being difficult. So I had to figure it out on my own. I started asking, what does motivate me? What does make me tick? If it isn't the money, then what is it? And that's when I unknowingly started to build the clarity compass, which is something that I now give to every single client that I work with. The idea is simple. Instead of starting with a revenue target and then working backwards, you start with your values. How do you want to feel every day? What does your ideal week actually look and feel like to you? What's the kind of work that you want to be doing that energizes you? That just the thought of it makes you want to jump out of bed? And what kind of a life are you actually living at that point in time? You get crystal clear on that first, and then you align your business to it. The money then becomes the final logical piece on top, almost like an assumption. If I want to build this life, then I know that I need this amount of money to be able to facilitate it. But the life itself is the goal. The money is just a tool to help you get there. And that's where I think so many people go wrong. So many business coaches and people online will tell you that you need to care about the money. And that's all they'll talk about because that's what matters to them. But I found that for people like us that have this brain type, that is not the thing that we're connected to. We are connected to the bigger vision of how we're going to be feeling, what our days and weeks look like. And the order matters more than people realize. Because if you're a hunter brain and you're chasing a number that you don't feel connected to or doesn't have any form of meaning to you, then you're not going to be able to facilitate or generate the motivation that's required to hit it. Your brain categorically needs to feel connected to the outcome that you're trying to achieve because we are interest driven and not importance driven. And abstract, fictitious targets don't generate that connection. And if you resonate with that, if you've ever been sat around a group of people that are obsessing about the revenue, but deep down, you know that's not what you care about, then let me know in the comments. I read every single one and I'm genuinely curious as to your experience and what that's been like for you. Now that 25 grand taught me something valuable about how I set goals, but the next investment taught me something even more valuable, and that's about how I build my business. A couple of years later, I joined another mentorship, one of those ones where you're paying a couple of grand a month. And very quickly, they told me that I needed to change my entire delivery model. Up until that point, I'd always done high proximity coaching. I'd have frequent calls with my clients and we'd really get into the weeds amongst real conversations. That's where I thrived. And I believe that's where a main bulk of the transformations at the time were taking place. And that's also where a large portion of my energy came from. But they said, get rid of all that. Switch to sending your clients weekly asynchronous Loom videos and create a community group because that's how you scale. That's the model that I needed to supposedly run in order to get to where I wanted to go. And that's what they were doing. That's what was working for them. So I did it and I fucking hated it. I remember sitting there on Sunday nights dreading Monday because Mondays was the day that I had to batch record all of these Loom videos and it would take me roughly around 6 hours. And every single week I would procrastinate until about 4 p.m, which meant that every week I was doing it late into the evening, rushing and resenting every second of it. Now naturally the quality of my work dropped. My clients' results frankly got worse and I truly started to detest my own business. And the worst part is at the time I couldn't articulate why I felt that way, but I did know that something felt deeply wrong. I felt very disconnected from the work and very disconnected from my clients. The energy was just totally gone. The thing that had made me good at this, the connection, the real-time thinking, the intimacy with my clients, I'd removed all of it because someone told me to. Then I finally got to a breaking point where I couldn't stand this anymore and I moved back to calls with my clients. And within just a matter of weeks, everything shifted. I felt energized after these sessions again. My clients started getting better results. Referrals started coming in left, right, and center. And I was enjoying work again for the first time in months. I have to stop following someone else's version of an optimal model. And I have to design my business around the way that my brain thrives, which is around my zone of genius, even if it doesn't look like what so-called experts say that it should look like. That mentorship wasn't necessarily wrong. Their model worked for their brain and for their strengths, but they gave me a blanket prescription, the same advice that they gave to every single one of their clients. And my brain couldn't run that operating system. And this is something that I constantly see now. Hunter brain entrepreneurs go into work with a business coach. They get told to build that specific type of business. They try to force themselves into that mold, and then they end up blaming themselves when it doesn't work. Now, the coach themselves isn't necessarily bad. The strategy may not be wrong, but it's just designed for a different brain. So at this point, I've learned that my goals need to be designed differently, and my business needs to be built differently too. Around the same type of time, I had paid somebody about $2,500 to build me out a totally bespoke Notion system, fully integrated into my business. Task management, project tracking, client onboarding, finance management, the lot. And I never used it, not once. And this isn't on them. They built exactly what I asked for at the time. This is totally on me. But the reason I never used it is the same reason so many productivity tools fail hunter brains. There was too much friction. Too many clicks were required to get me to where I wanted to go. Too many layers. Too many decisions before I could actually get into the work that I needed to do. My brain would open it, feel resistance, and then close it again. And I've done this more times than I can count. Apps, dashboards, systems, templates, all bought with the best intentions and all abandoned within a week. And I'd think, what is wrong with me? Why can't I just use this bloody Notion system like anybody else? Nothing was wrong with me. The tools were built for a brain that processes friction differently. A farmer brain can push through 6 clicks to get to a task. A hunter brain feels each one of those clicks as a high level of resistance. And resistance kills engagement before we even get started. And that friction thing, the pattern of buying tools and systems and then never using them again, it was actually a symptom of something much bigger that I didn't see until years later. At some point across all of these investments, I'd realized that I developed a habit, and a really expensive habit at that. I was collecting information. Every time I felt stuck, my instinct was to buy something new, a new course, a new mentor, a new program, because the act of buying felt productive. I got dopamine from purchasing, and that got conflated for me making progress. And that dopamine hit of this is going to be the thing that fix it was genuinely addictive, but I already knew what to do. I'd known for years. The strategy was there. The knowledge was there. I could have told you exactly what I needed to do inside of my business at any point, because the reality is the problem was never information. The problem was execution. There was a very big gap between knowing and doing, and no amount of new information was going to help me to close that gap. And this is specifically a hunter brain trap, and it's really worth you knowing why. Your brain gets a big dopamine hit from new information, from learning, from the novelty of a new approach, from the feeling that you found this secret answer. But the execution of that answer, that's repetitive. That's boring. That's often low stimulation, despite what you'll likely get on the other end of the execution. So the brain naturally gravitates to trying to seek out more information rather than focusing on the required implementation. And truth be told, the coaching industry is perfectly designed to exploit this. There is always another program, always another framework, always another expert who's just packaging the same information in a different way that makes your brain think, this is it, this time it will be different. It won't be different, because the bottleneck for you was never the information. The bottleneck is your execution system. But there was something else that was hidden underneath the information collecting that took me even longer to see. I wasn't just collecting information when I was signing up to all of these programs, coaches, and mentors. I was collecting and seeking permission. I was looking for someone to tell me that the way I wanted to run my business was okay, that it was valid, that I was allowed to do it my way. Because every time I had an instinct about how something should work, how I should deliver, how I should structure my days, what kind of a business I actually wanted to build, there was a voice in my head going, but that's not what that guru said that I should do. And so I'd buy another program, hoping somebody would finally give me the blueprint that felt right, when actually the blueprint was already inside of me. I just needed to stop asking for permission and to start trusting the signals that my brain was already giving me. I had to take everything that I'd learned, all of it, and design my own version around my brain. I had to teach myself to stop spending money on learning what to do and start spending energy on actually doing it. I had to optimize for execution rather than knowledge. And I had to accept that nobody was going to give me permission to build the business around my brain that I actually wanted to build. That permission had to come from me. And that is what 150 grand's worth of investments taught me. The advice was usually pretty solid. The coaches were usually good. The problem was that nobody, not one of these coaches, mentors, or programs, accounted for the brain that was actually trying to implement it. And that is the gap that I'm filling now. Now, there is a myth that's floating around the ADHD space that almost derailed me for a number of months. And that's that ADHD is a superpower. And it sounds nice, but it's bollocks. And I'll explain why in this video here. So give it a click and I'll catch you over there.